Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo story. Lots of developments happening in India's neighborhood. In Bangladesh, a special tribunal has sentenced former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to death, accusing her of crimes against humanity for the violent crackdown that started last year when there was an uprising in Bangladesh that in fact led to the ouster of Hasina, and she's been living in India ever since August of 2024. But she has denounced the verdict as a rigged tribunal, calling the charge fabricated and politically driven. Now, this ruling has sent across shock waves. And how is India going to react to these developments? And how are these developments going to impact the dynamics within Bangladesh? We're going to discuss this, and we're joined by an eminent panel to discuss that. Let's introduce our guests. We're joined by Padma Rao, who's a senior journalist and has been covering foreign affairs for many decades, and she knows the story like the back of her hand. We're also joined by Alauddin Muhammad, who's the Joint Member Secretary, National Citizen Party. Welcome to Mojo Story. And we're also joined by Faisal Mahmood, Press Minister, Bangladesh High Commission, New Delhi. Faisal Saab, welcome to Mojo Story. And Veena Sikri, former ambassador, she's also joining us. Welcome all to Mojo Story. If I may start with you, Faisal Mahmood. Sorry, many people say that the verdict is basically one-sided. It does not take into consideration the other side, because all those lawyers that were put up were defense lawyers appointed by the government, and it is really a one-sided verdict. That's what Sheikh Hasina has also said, that it's a rigged tribunal. What do you have to say?
Thank you so much. I mean, you have to define the word many here because it's a vague term. I believe by many you mentioned that the Awami League supporters and the supporters of Sheikh Hasina and her party Awami League, right?
Yes,
Because
yes,
if you look at Bangladeshi people, like in general people, they're not considering it as a rigged verdict. The fact is that this is being given by an ICT tribunal which was established by Sheikh Hasina herself, and it was established
yes.
specifically to try, war criminals and the people who are accused of like crimes against humanity. So, after the interim government came to power after last year's uprising, the mandate of the ICT tribunal was extended, and since it was considered to a larger section of the people that what Sheikh Hasina did back in those 21 days amounted to crimes against humanity. So that's why she was charges against her was brought in this ICT tribunal. And after due process, the verdict was given. So I believe it's the verdict was given after due process. So whatever Sheikh Hasina, the former prime minister and her party supporters are saying, that's politically motivated and politically charged statement. I don't think that's amounted to something that is credible.
Right. Of course, that is the government line. But Veena Sikri, you have been tracking the Bangladesh story very closely. We have discussed this on many of our shows. What is the sense that you get after this verdict? This was on expected lines, and that's precisely the reason that Sheikh Hasina flew into India, because that is what was expected at the outset.
Well, yes, that proves the extent to which the verdict is described as rigged. Well, I'd like to say that when your panelist said that this was the mandate, it was extended, the mandate of the ICT. The point is that this government is not a legally constituted government. It is a government brought in after a regime change operation and after the parliament has been dissolved. So where is the mandate to be extended from? There is no parliament to give a mandate. There is no government to give a mandate. If you describe an interim regime, of course, even when the interim regime was sworn in on the constitution of Bangladesh, at that point, the constitution did not even have it does not still have a provision for an interim regime. So that itself proves how unconstitutional the government is. But even if you do consider what an interim regime responsibilities are supposed to have been, which are now being discussed in court in Bangladesh. These include just holding free and fair and inclusive elections after 90 days and maintaining law and order. There is no other job for an interim regime. And I think the very fact that the lockdown, which was called by Sheikh Hasina on the 13th and yesterday, the success of the lockdown, the way in which people just kept away from any kind of activity, and the way in which they have supported Sheikh Hasina's call for the lockdown, shows that her vote bank, her constituency is intact. It may even have gone up. And the third part I'd like to point out is, how are these judges there? Because we do know that the previous judges who were in the Supreme Court, the High Court, the ICT, including the prosecutor himself, they were all forced to resign after the new regime came to power. They were surrounded by mobs, there was mobocracy, mob violence, sometimes their homes were attacked, and so they all resigned by force. Now, okay, they resigned, but then where is the mandate to appoint new judges? And these new judges are, all known to be of one particular political dispensation. I mean, I can give you one example that the chief prosecutor of the ICT, who is now the chief prosecutor of the ICT, till yesterday he was a defense lawyer defending the war crime, those who were accused of war crimes from the Jamaat-e-Islami and other individuals who were accused of. He was their defense lawyer, and now he's the prosecutor. So, in many ways, I think globally and within Bangladesh, the very legality, the validity, the right of the ICT to try Sheikh Hasina is being greatly questioned. And this is something that we do know. All the global agencies have expressed deep regret over the death penalty that has been given to Sheikh Hasina. I'd like to point out one more thing also, which is very relevant in this context, that even when the Mohammed Yunus regime asked the UN Human Rights Office, Volker Turk is the head of that office, asked him to do a report on what happened in Bangladesh. That report covered only the period from, say, 15th of July to 5th of August. But we do
Right.
know a lot of the killings took place after 5th of August. The attack on the media, which has been completely emasculated, all the media houses have been taken over. Journalists are in jail for more than 1 year without any kind of charge sheet or trial. The attacks on Awami League, 400 and more people killed. The attacks on the minorities, the Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, Sufis, and Ahmadiyyas, taking place 2,000 in the first 2 weeks. This has not been included at all, in the mandate of any kind of inquiry. Rather, the people who've been involved in this have been given indemnity by the Yunus regime. So this
Right.
kind of a completely lopsided dealing of the issue casts a shadow of doubt on the way in which this ICT judgment can hold up, or whether it has been totally panned out to create only one answer, which was inevitable.
Yeah. Yes, those are valid questions that have been raised. Alauddin Muhammad, Veena, Sikri, really questioning the mandate of this government and the judge to pass this verdict in the first place, because this is not a democratically elected government. And when some of the judges were surrounded and cornered, these are a set of judges. So they were not there. They are now passing on this verdict. So the questions will obviously be raised.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah.
I was listening to Ms. Bina Sikri, who was serving in Bangladesh also for quite a long time. The first thing is that, yes, it's true that the government was not formed purely based on any constitutional provision, but the fact that on 5 August 2024, we have seen that the Prime Minister, along with all her like member of parliaments, chief justice, even the grand mufti of a national mosque, you did not find a single person from the last regime to hand over or any way to transfer the responsibilities. So it was a huge mess, and the idea of the revolution, or in limited scale, what we call it mass uprising. So the mass uprising itself is the mandate and the supreme will of the people in any democratic process. Because when we ask for the validation for this government as interim government, whether they are formed based on what, they are actually formed based on the street people who demonstrated and protested, and they had the legitimacy that time to form the government, and there was no other option like the chaos. And you can say even there was no League supporters also in that time to like fight back. So in that cases, I don't think that the first thing, the we can't question the validity of this interim government. The second thing is that
So
yes,
why we are questioning
there,
the validity? Because there are no elections that were conducted. This government has come into power when one of the regimes was dethroned. Sheikh Hasina was ousted. She was forced to, at a very short notice, to fly into India. And at that spur of moment, this government came into that there are no elections. So
yeah,
the
I
mandate, the
mean,
government will have the
yes,
mandate and there will be elections. Where are the elections?
yes. You just
I'll come to you. I'll come to you, Faisal Saab.
are you stopping me now, or
Yeah,
should
yeah.
I
No,
continue?
no, no. You continue. You continue. Yeah.
Okay. The first point is that when we had an election in 7 January 2024, where major parties did not participate. Another thing is that, yes, it's true that election is the one way to transfer of the power. But in the last 2014 election, 2018 election, and 2024 election, all those three elections were rigged, and all those three elections were unique in three senses. So there was no exit route for return to democracy. So it was the last even step where the movement came from student groups which was not supposed to fight for power, or who are not supposed to fight for bringing back democracy. This is the leadership of the students and all the major political parties, and finally the mass people joined the protest. So yes, we can technically
Right.
argue that where is the, like, how to transfer the power. But when
Right.
you have stopped all the way and then people come out of the street, and I mean,
But
can we like question
but
the
the
sovereign will
question,
of the people
Alauddin
to
Saab,
change such
Alauddin Saab,
regime?
the question is that when this new dispensation came to power, they had a limited mandate. They were basically there to conduct the elections. All these things could have been done after the elections. Some say these were done deliberately before the announcement of the election dates. I want to go across to Padma Rao. Padma, how do you see these developments and Indian response? The fact that NSA of Bangladesh is visiting India, and India has issued a very cautious sort of a statement. Also, the fact that Sheikh Hasina has been in India, she has been speaking to media lately. What is the sense that you make?
Okay, good evening. I have a few points to make. I'm glad you brought up India's statement, because India's
Yeah.
statement I find actually quite masterly and quite subtle. Especially the inverted commas which flank the International Crimes Tribunal. Those are very telling, and I'm certain that they're quite deliberate, because they clearly place a question mark on the constitutionality and legality of this tribunal. Now, we have been discussing it. Faisal has made a few points, and as has Alauddin. To
Yeah.
Faisal, Faisal, you pointed out correctly that this tribunal was actually constituted under Sheikh Hasina. But at the same time, if you recollect that, initially appeals were not allowed under the originally envisaged tribunal, and then there were protests about that. So appeals were then allowed, and some people who were accused even, were then won the appeals. So, my question to you is that if you are saying that this is this is a perfectly legitimate verdict, then will this International Crimes Tribunal allow an appeal in the case of Sheikh Hasina? Because right now what we're hearing is there's a death sentence for for police firing of 1,400 people, including students, during the rioting last year. How legal is a death sentence for such an act? Hasina was not present herself to defend herself at this court, and as a man pointed out, the only defending lawyers were those hired by, as well as judges hired by the interim administration of Professor Yunus. So I do feel that, and then to Alauddin, you say that a mass uprising and that itself is a mandate. In no country, if Bangladesh wants to continue to call itself a democracy, how can you say that a mass uprising itself is a mandate? You need other, yes, certainly there may have been rigged elections prior to previously, but you need proper mechanisms in place to examine those rigged elections or to investigate those rigged elections. So, given all this, I do feel that there is, and I feel very strongly that there is a foreign hand behind this. And as far as India's relationship, and we all know what those foreign hands are, we'll come to that in a minute. But I think India's relationship, since you brought it up, Zaffar, is, I think it can be called a cross-party one because it's under Indira Gandhi that Madam Hasina was granted asylum in India in the 70s. I remember she was my neighbor on Pandara Road during those years. And it is under later administrations, including that of Mr. Modi, that bilateral relations have reached better and higher levels. And one of them a person who's contributed to them is also Mrs. Sikri, who was an ambassador and the only woman Indian ambassador in Bangladesh, and it's a matter to be proud of. So the border issue also was settled. All the maritime issues were also settled under Sheikh Hasina during her time between India and Bangladesh. So this is a very valuable relationship. And as you pointed out, the Bangladesh National Security Advisor, the interim advisor, he's going to be here tomorrow, although he's coming for the Colombo Security Conclave, which is a regional grouping, as you know, of neighborhood security. Obviously, that visit is going to be watched very closely. And a very last word to India's relations with Dhaka, I think will remain under pressure because India is not going to extradite Sheikh Hasina and has found legal basis in the treaty signed. Whether it's dubious or not, there is a clause that excludes political asylum seekers from being extradited. Even though there's a fine line between what is a political asylum seeker and, say, a convicted criminal who's also sought asylum out of fear of arrest and persecution. But there is also a clause that either side can withdraw from the treaty with 6 months' notice. So I think the relationship will remain strained, but Sheikh Hasina is definitely not going to be extradited.
Faisal sir, please respond to a variety of points that Padma Rao has enlisted.
Padmaraji, first coming to your point, you mentioned that whether there will be scope for appeal. I think there will be a scope for appeal because it is being incorporated within the mandate of ICT tribunal, number one. And to come to the point of, that still old debate of calling this government not a legitimate government, like, of course, it is an interim government. I have no doubt. We don't have any doubt about that. That's an interim government. The main job of the government is to make sure that there is a credible election and transfer the power to a democratically elected government. That's for sure. But the point is, you have to understand the gravity of the situation that had happened back in 2024. I mean, within a span of 21 days, 1,400 civilians were killed. So it's something unprecedented in the recent modern history. And I'm bringing up the issue like this government is not legitimate and conducting anything under this government is not legitimate is a strawman fallacy. Because first of all, India still has an active high commissioner in Bangladesh. We still have an active high commissioner in India. So come to the bilateral relationship, we are having this working bilateral relationship. And I think our Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met our chief advisor, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, on I think at least more than one occasion. So and yes, it means that we at the executive branch level, it is accepted that this is a legitimate government. And now, when you talk about like ICT and the cases against Hasina, okay, I mean, having a case against a former prime minister is of course a political issue. I understand, and the fact that Sheikh Hasina is taking refuge in India is another point to be noted. But my point is, this ICT, you have to look at the evidence that this ICT brought up against former prime minister, and you have to consider that whether those evidence have merit. I mean, there are audio records which establish command responsibility towards Hasina. The full text of the verdict hasn't yet been released, but I can tell you from whatever we have heard from this ICT tribunal and the judge's statement, it's essentially a primary evidence. So there is no doubt about that that Sheikh Hasina was responsible for. I mean, she cannot escape the common responsibility of those killings. And you mentioned about like extradition treaty, and yes. If you look at the rest, I mean, yesterday after this verdict, our foreign ministry, like Minister of Foreign Affairs, issued a statement, and in which it categorically asked for, the Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal and also the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and invoked the extradition treaty to bring them back to Bangladesh to face the justice. And after that, the Indian External Affairs Ministry issued a statement which you mentioned that they put international crime tribunals within this inverted comma. By the way, they made a mistake. They made a spelling mistake of committed. I was very surprised to see that. Anyway, so yes, but their response, if you look at the response of the executive branch of Indian government, and I think here is Madam Ambassador Veena Sikri is here, it's very measured. So my point is the Indian government is maintaining a working relationship with the Bangladesh's interim regime, and it essentially proves that they have accepted what sort of government Bangladesh is having right now. And as I mentioned earlier, that we are having a transitional phase. We have already declared an election date, and the election will be conducted in due time. So I
Right.
mean,
Right.
yes.
Faisal Saab, yes, you made your point. The point, Veena Sikri, I was just hearing Faisal Saab, and one thing struck me that elections will be announced. Sheikh Hasina, who was the prime minister, is now sentenced to death. Her party may not be allowed to take part in the election, or would it be? It just crossed my mind that look at what happened in Pakistan. The leader, the most popular leader, Imran Khan, was jailed. His party was, kept out of election. Their election symbol was also snatched. It doesn't look like the same model that's being applied here also.
Yes, absolutely. I think you have quite hit the nail on the head because Padmaji very carefully said that the presence of external powers in organizing the regime change operation was more than evident. But certainly Pakistan was the conduit. And the conduit for Pakistan in Bangladesh has been the Jamaat-e-Islami, and through them the Islami Chhatra Shibir, which is the students' wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami. Now, this so-called spontaneous students' uprising, which is being mentioned by both our panelists from Bangladesh, Muhammad Yunus himself, speaking in New York in September 2024 at the Clinton Global Initiative, said that don't think this is a spontaneous student uprising. It is meticulously designed. And he invited his own Mahfouz Alam, who was then now an advisor in the government, to say he is the mastermind behind the operation. So I don't understand this whole question of spontaneity. And also, if there was this so-called students who were there in the uprising, we know that they are completely disillusioned today. And just a few days ago, on 13th of November, they erupted in their universities and colleges and schools because the earlier decision of the Yunus regime to have music teachers and singing teachers and PT teachers was completely reversed, and they've said only religious teachers will come. And the people of Bangladesh rose as one and said, our culture is our religion. This is our identity. Religion is very important, it's important for everybody, but culture is the identity, and that is the shared identity between India and Bangladesh. We have a civilizational heritage. I'd like to say to our colleague from the Bangladesh High Commission that yes, India always deals with the government of the day. The government which is there of the day is the one that we deal with. This is a diplomatic practice we have always followed. It does not say anything about the constitutionality or legality or Indian acceptance of the constitutionality and legality of that government. We deal with the government of the day because, particularly with a neighboring country like Bangladesh, where you have a 4,000-kilometer border, more than 4,000-kilometer border, even with countries like Myanmar, there are so many day-to-day issues, cross-border issues, trade issues, which have to be dealt with, which are in the benefit of the people of Bangladesh and India. So that is why our day-to-day relations always go ahead. And in the message that our Prime Minister issued on the 8th of August last year, addressed to Muhammad Yunus, he said, we are happy to continue the cooperation. We felicitate you. We are happy to continue the cooperation. But he also mentioned about the tremendous attacks on the minorities. And just 2 weeks ago in 2 months, maybe in September, when Dr. Muhammad Yunus was in New York, he was asked by an interviewer that, why have you banned the Awami League? And he said, no, I have not banned the Awami League. I have just banned the activities of the Awami League. And then when he was asked, so will the Awami League take part in the elections? He said, well, that's for the Election Commission to decide. Abroad, he says that. In India, he says something else. And when he was asked about the attacks on the minorities in India, sorry, there are minorities in Bangladesh, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Sufis, and the Ahmadiyas. He said, oh, that's fake news from India. Now, look, when you know that there are cases, 100 people, last August, September, we were told that 100 people have been arrested because of these various cases. But of course, after that, we heard nothing about that. We know that the great rallies that were led by Chinmoy Das and so many of the young community of the religious minorities, they participated. They said, this is our country. We want to stay here. We want our rights as citizens of Bangladesh. And Chinmoy Das has been thrown in jail. He's been there for 1 year without even a charge sheet. So I think that, please, there has to be a certain reality about what we say, about what we talk about. Saying that you can just come and say that for 15 months, when you haven't had elections for 15 months, that means the Yunus regime has lost the right to hold elections. There has to be a new caretaker government. There has to be free, fair, inclusive, and credible elections. The Awami League, the Jatiyo Party, all these parties that were completely left out of any discussions shows the biased approach. You are saying that Sheikh Hasina did not allow the BNP. You're claiming that, although the BNP was allowed to part with, they decided not to part with. Anyway, you're blaming Sheikh Hasina for that, but you're doing the same thing yourselves. So how does that gel? How does it match? So I think that this is
let's go across to Alauddin Muhammad. Suppose we take your point that they were not allowed to take part in the elections in the past, but two wrongs never make a right. The fact is that some people argue that this verdict could have come later, perhaps after the announcement. It was very deliberate that this verdict has been passed before the announcement of the elections, and Sheikh Hasina's party will not take part in those elections. How credible will that election be? Because it is a party in Bangladesh. It had been in power in the past. It had a prime minister. Whatever the reason that it was a party, now if one of the parties is taken out of the process, then how credible will those elections be? Alauddin,
Okay,
sir?
so the first thing is that I think Ambassador Sikri is not informed or not taking information from the Indian High Commission in Dhaka. Just before 2 weeks, from our party, we met the first secretary of political, and we did not find any evidence or ground on the facts Madam Sikri was raising, and based on that, coming to a conclusion regarding the situation in Bangladesh again and again uttered. I think the Indian High Commission in Dhaka is much more informed and logical regarding the reality here, and they should take proper information from their own mission here. The second thing is that we have not found any Awami League leaders even here, like who can come out and address the things happened in
So,
last
but why is
July,
that?
August
Why
2024.
is that
So
Awami League leaders are not present? Why is that?
they listen? There are some leaders who are present. Even they're staying in their own home, and they're like not involving in political activities even before
Is it because of fear?
before
Is it
the
because of
before the
fear?
before the banning of the political activities. The first thing is that we have to acknowledge one thing, that what happened in 2024 July August was a mass uprising, spontaneous. The even after 1.5 years, if you portrayed that it's a like regime change operation, you just ignore, you just not accepting the legitimacy or even the right of the Bangladeshi people for their own democratic right to throw the any government who is not elected by them, which is not listening to them, which became like a monstrous killer. So you
Right.
have to accept,
But
madam,
but
this fact
but
that
but but
this is
but
the people of the Bangladesh.
Alauddin Saab, more than a year has
Yes,
passed. More than a year has passed, and
yes,
everybody is waiting for elections. When people will decide, it is for the people to decide.
yes. People will
People's power
decide.
will
You
matter.
have not
People's
run.
power will
You
matter.
you have No, brother. You have not run for another referendum or election that okay, people whether they will decide regarding the extension of this interim government or not. Interim government is working on the election. When you just imagine one thing, yes, it's true that the previous governments in 1991 or later also as a caretaker government, they used to held election within 3 months. But this government, it took merely 6 to 8 months only to fix the previous system, only to like operate. Even the police did not work for the first 3 to 4 months. The ground reality is different. Another thing is that the Madam
Yeah,
Sikri was saying
Yeah, yeah,
naming some activists here.
right,
See that
right.
here according to the court, according to our judicial system, if someone is get
Yeah,
punished or that in charge, you can't simply identify his religious identity
we are
or activist
Alauddin
and
Saab,
just point out
we are
he's not the
we are
only one there.
we are we
Yes.
are we are just questioning the timing of this verdict. Padma Rao, you
What
want to come in here? You want to come in here?
this verdict, listen, this verdict, it government took more than 300 days after the filing of this verdict. Do you think that
Fine.
okay, it's too early? I don't think
No,
so.
Very
I'm.
briefly,
Yeah. Yes, Padma.
Alauddin, nobody is questioning the right of the Bangladeshis to protest or to take to the streets. If
Yes.
wrongs have been committed, people have the right to protest. That is the hallmark of any democracy. What is being questioned is the legitimacy of an interim regime, which has certainly come to that position with the support of the demonstrators and the people to continue to rule and to use courts of justice as this one merely to square and settle political rivalries. So that is what we're questioning. That is not is not it does not behove a democracy to say that okay, we have the people have gone to the streets and the people have chosen somebody. That is not a democracy. So just very quickly, I wanted to Zaffar about the elections. There is quite clearly not only a warming of relations between Pakistan and Bangladesh, but as ma'am was pointing out, the attempt to bar the Awami League from contesting the election, even that has a very clear Pakistani chap. This is, as you said, exactly what happened to Imran Khan and his Tehreek-e-Insaf. Now, the Awami League may have run itself into unpopularity over all kinds of things. We have no doubts about that, and we do not question, the anger of the people on. I mean, it was very visible and very palpable to all of us, and we all love Bangladesh very much as a country that we've all spent a lot of time in, and including even Professor Yunus, whom I've interviewed several times, and but somehow, it doesn't his personality of today and his own personality don't seem to gel at all. Now, there is, first of all, there's no denying that the Awami League has been in power for the longest spell. It is the oldest party. It is the party under which Bangladesh went from being known as a poor country to one whose GDP at one stage was even higher than that of India. So no election, Alauddin, can be a truly democratic one if any legally registered party is banned at the whim of, and that too at the whim of an interim administration. So that is why I feel that, and you're absolutely right, India will continue to work. India's statement was very balanced. It will continue to work. It will watch the elections closely, and it will continue to work with any administration, but only as long as it is an elected one. And I include even, parties that are known to be hostile to India, like, let's say, Madam Khalida Zia's Bangladesh Nationalist Party, for instance. So there is no doubt that India will be pragmatic on that front. But the point is that you cannot say that what is happening right now is legitimate and has the support of is reflective of a true democracy. That's the only objection that we are raising. Zaffar? Can't hear you.
Yeah. I'm saying, Veena Sikri, you want to come in here?
Wanting to say one point, for example, one point that was said just now about, even the police force was not there. But that is the precise point. The attacks on the police stations, 436 police stations in Bangladesh out of 600 something, were attacked and destroyed. Hundreds, even in the thousands, policemen were killed. No wonder they are too, apprehensive of the present situation. This is not something I'm making up. This is coming in the ICC itself. This has been filed. Now, this is the other point, that the point that Sheikh Hasina has made, that because she feels that she has not got a proper trial, she's prepared to go to the International Criminal Court at The Hague, and people have already been filing cases there. More than 5 or 6 cases have been filed there, bringing out this fact about the policemen who've been killed, about the media men who are still in prison, about the Awami Leaguers who have been killed, 400 or more of them. So please, why not then accept what Sheikh Hasina has said? There has been no ability for her side to give their cases here. Go to the ICC and do it there. Cases have already been filed there. So what I'm trying to say is that and also again, you cannot deny the statements made by your own interim regime chief advisor. You are giving another narrative. Students uprising, etc. He is saying in New York it was a meticulously designed operation. So I mean, when he is saying it himself, we have to believe what he says. So this is the whole point. I think that arguing one case in the Bangladesh media, saying something else abroad, and then thinking nobody in Bangladesh knows about it. All this is giving a lot of a lack of veracity to the whole situation. It is questioning the interim regime and the NCP and all their stated love for democracy, because they're not allowing democratic forces to prevail. So I think that we would like very much for India does attach the highest importance to the relationship with Bangladesh, but all the decisions and statements made by Dr. Mohammed Yunus and others in Bangladesh have been quite to the contrary. You have cancelled so many of the very beneficial decisions for Bangladesh traders, that they were allowed to use the road link. They were allowed to use so many things that have been cancelled. So India has been forced to take decisions in exchange. I am very glad that a High Commissioner is meeting everybody. That is his role. His role is to meet. When I was there, he used to meet everybody, and I'm glad that our High Commissioner there, whom I know well, Mr. Pranay Verma, is meeting everybody. It's a very good thing. That is, he must know what everybody is feeling, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't know what the actuality is that's going on. So please, that is the situation. Thank you.
Right. Faisal Mahmood Saab, last word to you before we wrap up.
Where should first of all, as I mentioned earlier, that this is an interim government. We know that, but this government will hold an election in upcoming February. That's for sure. Now, if you ask the question repeatedly that why it has taken so many months, because this government was not like a regular interim government like the one that we previously had and used to call them caretaker government. And even that provision of having a caretaker government was abolished by the Awami League government. You know that, right? That the constitutional 15th amendment was nullified. So again, we understand, we acknowledge that this is not a regular, normal democratic government. But as my fellow panelist from Bangladesh, Mr. Alauddin mentioned, this government is formed basing on people's will. And after 5th August, you see that all the important people of the last regime, they were not present. They fled to another country. And so, I mean, if they talk about now inclusiveness and other things, it's very hard for us to pinpoint what sort of inclusiveness they are talking about, because they fled the country and take refuge to another country. So my point is that yes, we are going to go back to democratic process once more, and I think this time it will be a proper democratic process, because the democratic process that we used to have during the last 1.5 decade under Sheikh Hasina regime was not a proper democratic process. Now we can talk a lot about it, but the fact is that the 2014, 2018, and 2024 election were rigged ones. And coming to other points like equating Pakistan's situation and equating Awami League with BNP or other parties, it will probably give us mislead us because Awami League is banned. Awami League will not be able to take part in the election because of what they did in those 21 days. I mean, first of all, this is not a permanent ban. It's an interim ban that is being bestowed on Awami League because, as I mentioned, because of their activities in those 21 days. BNP didn't take part in 2024 election because we all knew that there was no situation. I mean, after 2018 election, we pejoratively call as a midnight election, no other party except Awami League and its allies have confidence on Awami League government to take part in the election, right? But so the whole point is, if suppose if interim ban on Awami League is being lifted right now, the Awami League leaders are all in hiding, and most of them are in India. They will not come back to Bangladesh and take part in the election. So this is a whole straw man fallacy to point out that Awami League will not be given the chance to take part in the election. I don't see any
And
merit to
the
that.
question must be asked that I asked earlier also, why are they in hiding? Veena Sikri, last word to you before we
Okay.
wrap up.
Very quickly, I want to say just 2 points. First of all, there are many, many Awami Leaguers still in Bangladesh. We know that, and I'm sure all our colleagues from Bangladesh know that. Yes, you're right that many have fled because they were fearing their lives, whatever the reason. But there are millions of Awami Leaguers in Bangladesh, including leaders, and they're prepared to take part. That's number one. Number two, I want to point out that how can you call yourself a democracy? Let's look at other countries in South Asia. In Sri Lanka, the Rajapaksa government was very unpopular. There was a Gen Z uprising against, but the Gen Z uprising went back to parliament. They valued their democratic traditions. They had an interim president. They asked for elections, and the Rajapaksa party was not banned. We had identical visuals from Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Isn't it a strange coincidence? Entering Gana Bhavan, entering the presidential palace, and then similarly in Nepal, Gen Z forced the Oli government to resign, and elections have already been announced by a proper interim government. But there is no question of banning the former Prime Minister Oli's party. All political parties who have been registered, who have been existing, yes, if they have made mistakes, they have been brought down, that's fine. But now they must be there as part of the democratic process. Making these excuses doesn't give any value to the so-called love for democracy. And again, may I say, the violence after 5th of August, including after 8th of August. Why is that being ignored? You have not said a word about the violence against the minorities. The numbers who have been killed, who have been pushed out of the country, whose properties have been taken over, whose businesses have been destroyed, the rapes in the Khagrachari region, the indigenous people, all that. This is known. The world community knows about it. BBC has done documentaries on this. And there's not a word about it. Not a word to say that this is being stopped or action is being taken. Or that you're concerned about it at all.
We'll have to wrap it up here. Veena Sikri, Alauddin
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes, Faisal. Yes.
Ambassador Veena Sikri, in Sri Lanka and in Nepal, less than 50, let's say less than 100 people were killed. In Bangladesh, 1,400 people were killed in a span of 21 days.
That very number is being disputed because in your own media.
Disputed to whom?
I remember reading Pratham.
I mean, you can get a lot of information from, I believe from your own echo chamber, but getting information doesn't translate it into a knowledge, right? It's a fact.
Pratham said last August that we have gone door to door, we have gone to the hospitals, we have gone to the homes, and we have said as of 5th August, 350 people. So I think I'm saying that let's not get hung up on this figure of 1,400. It includes many people who have died after 5th of August. Maybe
people have lost life. We need to get hung up on these numbers. I mean,
yes.
1,400 is a large number.
I think the fact is that everybody has seen those visuals, what exactly happened. Those are very critical times. We did cover that story. And we are looking forward to that country because it's a neighboring country of India. India wishes well for Bangladesh, and that's why we are raising these questions and these points. We want to see a smooth transition to a democratically elected government. It's for the people of Bangladesh to decide who they want to bring in power. And when people will decide, that will be a legitimate government. It should be an all-inclusive election and an all-inclusive government. That's all we have the time today. Thanks so much to all our guests for joining us, and thanks to our viewers for watching the Mojo story. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.